Hi everybody, Michael from Dillinger's New York and Michael Dillinger Tours, and today's topic is the founder of the Columbia Journalism School, founder of the Pulitzer Prize, and savior of the Statue of Liberty, Joseph Pulitzer. Now before we begin, we need to address the issue of how to pronounce the name, because some people say Pulitzer, other people say no, it's Pulitzer. Well, you might think this is really a tomato-tomato issue, but you'd be wrong. There actually is a correct way to pronounce the name, and the correct way to pronounce the name is Pulitzer. We know this because of comments that were made by Emily Rao Pulitzer. She was the wife of Joseph Pulitzer Jr., and she made these remarks at the 10th anniversary of the Pulitzer Center. And she said, "My husband said that his father told people to say Pulitzer." So there you have it, the correct name, and now let's get on with our story. So Joseph Pulitzer's story, it's a story that actually goes from riches to rags and then back to riches once again. His final home in New York City is the Pulitzer Mansion. It is located at 11 East 73rd Street here in Manhattan. It opened in 1903. Now, he built this house because in 1900, January of 1900, his mansion down on East 55th Street was destroyed by fire, and so he built this new home. It cost $369,000, which is about $11.5 million today. Joseph Pulitzer was born in Hungary in 1847. He was born into a wealthy family. His father, a wealthy grain merchant. The father moved the family to the city of Budapest in 1853. The children, they had private tutors. They were studying German. They were studying French. But then in 1858, his father died. And when his father died, the business then went bankrupt and the family was plunged into poverty. Young Joseph moves about Europe looking for work, and he tries to enlist in several European armies, but he's rejected because of his weak eyesight and his frail health. But then while he's in Hamburg, Germany, he meets up with a bounty recruiter for the U.S. Union Army. During the American Civil War, the government offered recruitment bounties to raise armies. From 1861 until 1865, approximately $750 million was paid out in recruitment bounties. In 1864, a 17-year-old Joseph signs up as a substitute for a draftee, and he sails to Boston, Massachusetts. Now, when he arrives there, he finds out that the recruiters are going to keep most of his enlistment bounty, and so he walks out. He leaves the Deer Island Recruitment Center, and then he heads to New York City. And in New York, he's able to enlist and keep his full recruitment bounty by joining the 1st New York Lincoln Cavalry. After the war, he travels back to New York, and then he goes up to Boston to try the whaling industry, which he doesn't like. He seems it's kind of boring for him. Comes back to New York. He eventually makes his way out to St. Louis, Missouri. And out there, he's working a lot of different odd jobs. He works as a muleteer. He works as a baggage handler. He works as a waiter. And he spends a lot of time in that city's mercantile library studying English and law. And while he's there, he meets the editors of the Westlake Post. It's the leading German language paper in St. Louis at the time, and shortly after that, he actually is offered a job. He gains reputation as a tireless and enterprising reporter, and in just 4 years, in 1872, he's offered a controlling interest in the Westlake Post. And a few years after that, after some shrewd business deals, he actually parlays that into ownership of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which is still publishing to this day, a major newspaper in St. Louis. He works tirelessly at the Post-Dispatch and involved himself in every aspect of the paper. He's there from early morning until midnight or later. But all that workload takes a tremendous toll on his health. And in 1883, his doctor orders him to take a European vacation. And so he heads to New York with his wife. And just before he's about to board the ship, he has a meeting with Jay Gould, and he hears about an opportunity to buy the New York World, which was really struggling at the time. And so he throws off the idea of a European vacation. He settles into New York to build the New York World. Now, when Pulitzer takes over the New York World, the paper is an absolute mess. I mean, at the time, it's losing about $40,000 a year, and they have barely 15,000 subscribers. And so he takes this failing newspaper, and he turns it around. He turns it into one of the largest circulating newspapers in the United States with over 600,000 subscribers. How does he do this? The same way he turned the Post Dispatch, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, into such a huge newspaper. He focuses it on a more populist appeal. He focuses on investigations of public and private corruption. He uses images. He transfers over to color printing when it becomes available. And of course, he uses stunts and promotions. Now, one of his most famous promotions is the fundraising for the pedestal for the Statue of Liberty. So the Statue of Liberty, this gigantic gift from the people of France, the people of the United States of America, almost didn't get here because America had failed in its fundraising effort to get the money to build its pedestal. So Joseph Pulitzer seized on this. It was one of the first things he did. And he said, you know what? I'm going to let Americans get their name on my front page. If you want to donate to the Statue of Liberty, I'll publish your name on my front page, send in a single penny, and you'll get your name on my front page. And you know what? Within 6 months, 120,000 Americans donate to the statue. But because the names are held back, he doesn't publish the names right away, so you donate, and then the names are held back for a few days, so you would have to buy more than one issue of his newspaper to see your name in print. He also focuses on hiring some of the best investigative journalists he can find. In 1887, he hires Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly was well known for the incredible undercover work she did for the Pittsburgh Dispatch, exposing the poor working conditions faced by women. And so Pulitzer hires her on in 1887, and one of her first assignments is to pose as a mental patient out at Blackwell's Island to do an expose on the abuse and the neglect that are faced by the mental patients out at the asylum. It's an incredible piece. It leads to an incredible book, and also leads to a lot of great reforms, not only in the treatment of patients, but also in terms of safety regulations, fire regulations in the mental health profession. So Joseph Pulitzer is credited with a lot of amazing accomplishments, but there's one that some people might not think is so great, because he's also known as the inventor of yellow journalism. Now, yellow journalism is the use of extreme sensationalism and even fabricated news in order to sell newspapers. And this whole thing was born out of a rivalry between the New York World and the New York Journal. So you have Joseph Pulitzer with the New York World, and you have William Randolph Hearst with the New York Journal, and they enter into a circulation war. And that is how yellow journalism begins. Now, originally, it's known as yellow kid journalism because this entire war starts over a comic strip. In 1895, Joseph Pulitzer hires Richard Outcault to do a comic strip called Hogan's Alley, and the main character in that is called the Yellow Kid. And it's an incredibly successful comic strip, and a year later, Hearst lures Outcault away. He says, come over here, I got a lot more money for you, dude. And so Outcault jumps ship and goes over to the Journal. However, Outcault neglected to actually properly copyright the character. And so Joseph Pulitzer gets to run the Yellow Kid simultaneously with the Hearst version, and for about a year these papers have these competing comic strips, but they go further. All these different things are going on, but this war actually culminates in the build-up to the Spanish-American War. So Cuba is actually revolting against Spanish rule, and they have a revolution going on. And the U.S. has a battleship down there, the USS Maine, which mysteriously blows up. And so both papers, the World and the Journal, start campaigning. We must go to war with Spain. And they really push, and eventually, of course, America does go to war with Spain. It's only about a 4-month war, but both papers end up taking credit for this. After the war, Pulitzer turns away from yellow journalism. The paper becomes more restrained. It actually becomes very influential in things like antitrust legislation, insurance industry regulation, and even taking on the federal government. And he wins major victories for freedom of the press in the courts. Joseph Pulitzer died in 1911, and in his will he left $2 million to Columbia University to establish the journalism school. A few years earlier, while discussing his proposal for a journalism school, Pulitzer wrote, "Our republic and its press will rise or fall together. An able, disinterested, public-spirited press with trained intelligence to know the right and the courage to do it can preserve that public virtue without which popular government is a sham and a mockery. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce in time a people as base as itself. The power to mold the future of the Republic will be in the hands of the journalists of future generations.